Yeah, family, y'all. Just keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. Oh, right. Yeah. Here we go.
From natural law ethics in the Middle Ages, then, now we jump into social contract ethics. So we're jumping forward some 400 years now. What's happening? Now we're in the middle of the Enlightenment, where people are starting to throw God out of the equation here, right? We're realizing that, you know what? You're saying that God set up these laws of how it is that the earth turns on its axis and all, but you know what? I have a feeling that there are certain natural laws that govern these things. We don't need God to explain certain things. So the Enlightenment is all about taking certain things that we did before. We used to use God to explain certain things. No, we're not using God to explain that anymore. We're not saying, if you go down in that lifeboat or not, that's God's will, right? If you die, it's God's will that you die. If you live, it's God's will to die. No, wait a minute. It's all about us as human beings now. Follow me? If Mario wants to believe in God and say it's in God's hands, that's fine. I don't know about you, but Mario's off the boat. Follow me? We as human beings are thinking about these things now without God, now that we've come to the Enlightenment. So we're going from medieval thinkers to modern thinkers. Some of the names that we're going to hear are Thomas Hobbes from England, John Locke from England, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Switzerland. They're people who were heavily influenced by the Enlightenment, by the scientific approach to reality. They were beginning to question everything. And if you can't verify it through science, then we're not talking about it together. We're only going to talk about those things that all of us can agree on in this room, through science. They're not going to base their theories on a religious worldview. They're not going to talk about God. They're not going to assume that God created the universe with certain universal laws. They're also going to reject Aristotle. Imagine that. So Aristotle was this great philosopher. Thomas Aquinas took Aristotle and built on it. Wait a minute. Aristotle lived how many centuries ago now? No. They're getting rid of Aristotle's thinking. And so, if it can't be verified by science, then it has no place in us. So, and also these other ideas about human beings being social and human beings wanting to know and wanting to learn, all that is naive, thought modern philosophers. That's a rosy picture of the human being. Not all human beings are social. Got news for you. Not all human beings are social. So they came up with the principle of self-interest. Let's think about that with the analogy of the lifeboat. 28 of us in a lifeboat that only holds 20. There's a principle of self-interest, or we call it ethical egoism, which means who are we thinking about? I don't know about you, but every person in that lifeboat is thinking about him or herself. And so, as we're all looking around wondering who's going to be thrown overboard, I know that I'm looking at you, but I also know that you're looking at me. We're all looking at one another. Thank goodness for the religious people like Mario who's saying, let's just leave it in God's hand.
Let's see who falls out.
The rest of us are thinking about ourselves. So here we have these modern philosophers who are thinking something different. They have this other idea about human inclinations. They say the human is inclined, yes, like that ball going down the hill, it's inclined to certain things. What are we inclined to do? We're inclined to be self-centered and to think about ourselves first, and we're motivated by our own self-interests, and we're bent on preserving ourselves. In that lifeboat, that's what they believe the dynamic was. Every person is out for him or herself. Self-interested behavior is part of our psychology. And this principle of self-interest is going to be the centerpiece of social contract theory. That we should always do those things that benefit ourselves and are in our own self-interest. So we have this concept in social contract ethics that we call the state of nature. Imagine for a moment that we didn't live in Austin, Texas, but we all lived in some primitive society without laws, eating the dinosaur meat that we eat, or whatever it is. What would life be like in a primitive society without laws? They refer to that as the state of nature. Human beings in the state of nature are going to be violent. Why, Sierra?
And chaotic.
Okay, because now we're not on a lifeboat because we haven't invented lifeboats yet, but we did just kill a goat. And the thing is that Chris, being the tallest and the strongest of all, is the one that's holding the goat. So what does that mean for all of us who love a part of that goat? It means that we as a primitive people, we're in a state of war where we're going to be looking around and trying to figure out what that means for us.
That's when we started giving up kings and queens and all of that, right?
I hear people
Or
telling
who
Chris
can
that
you
he's going down.
Ronnie, don't say that.
Because I'm imagining that there are certain dynamics that are being set up because Chris is surrounding himself with those that he's promising to share the goat with. I already heard him whisper to Deacon Roy, I'll share this goat with you if you protect me from all these people. I heard him say that to Raphael. I mean, there are certain things in the state of nature, it's a state of war, right? It's everyone looking out for him or herself, which means that those of us who are not thinking that we're getting any goat today, we're thinking about how it is we're going to get the goat today. So what would life be like in the state of nature without any human laws or government, without any police or societal punishments? Do we have this natural law written in our hearts where we're all going to be good to one another? The modern philosophers didn't think so. They thought that was a little naive. Do we naturally know right from wrong? Modern philosophers were a little skeptical about that. Thomas Hobbes said that in the state of nature, humans have nothing to stop them from their inclination to preserve themselves. And so if we're in a society without laws, what are we going to do? We're going to do whatever we need to do to live and to survive and to protect ourselves. And if that means killing Christopher for the goat, sorry, Christopher. Right? Human beings are interested in themselves and in their own survival, thought the modern philosophers. So that's what they're going to be looking out for. Hobbes said, in such a condition, everyone has a right to everything, even to another's goat or to another's body. Right? In a society without rules, there are no rules, right? Christopher has a goat. If we can overpower him, that goat is ours. In the state of nature, we're free to do whatever we want because there are no natural laws. The only laws are those that we agree to follow. Suddenly, Christopher came up with an idea. He said, people of Austin, I will share this goat with all 20 of you if in turn you promise me allegiance as your king. What do you think? Okay, we're coming into a social contract now where we're giving up certain things. We're giving up the freedoms that we have to kill Christopher. We'll let him live. In return, we're getting something back. We're getting goat. Are we all willing to live with that contract? We all share the goat, so long as we acknowledge Christopher as our king. Ancient ethics, according to this view, were naive in thinking that we're naturally inclined toward virtue. Remember, Aristotle said that we're naturally inclined to virtue, this balance between certain vices. Instead, the state of nature is really a state of war. Before we come into this social contract, we're at war with one another. Unless we can come up with a contract among us, a social contract, then we're really in a state of war. Think William Golding's 1954 novel, The Lord of the Flies. Have you ever seen that movie? About some English boys, a group of English boys who are in a plane crash. They land on an island. There are no adults around. And so suddenly they are organizing themselves with no adults and no rules except for the rules that they create. It's like a picture of what it would be for us living in a primitive society. Think about how people react in catastrophes and disasters, right? After Hurricane Katrina, right? People break into stores, loot, rob, steal, do whatever they need to do, right? It's essentially, that's the state of war. When riots break out, Los Angeles, 1992, right? That was a state of nature right there, where people are doing what they would do if left to themselves, according to the modern philosophers. Hobbes says, it's everyone against everyone, with continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So in the state of nature, the state of war, we're not living in safety or security or peace, because anything we have, someone else could try to steal. This marker that I have, I saw Deacon Cleophas looking at it. And in the state of nature, there's nothing to keep him from knocking me over and taking my marker. Right? The strongest one in the room gets the marker. Once he steals the marker from me, there's nothing to stop Dulce from taking away from him. The strongest is going to end up with the marker. And so in the state of nature, it's all about psychological and ethical egoism. It's all about me. And if I want the marker and I'm strong enough to get it, I'm going to have it. So why do we start to make contracts then? In a state of nature, we don't get the security, the stability, the comforts that we want. And so we enter into mutually beneficial contracts with others so we can get a piece of the goat, or so we can get a share in the marker. We enter into these contracts not because we're naturally cooperative human beings, but because we realize we have a better chance of getting what we want if we get along with other people. Follow me? We could be at war with one another, or we could realize, wait a minute, you know what? If we all got along, we could all get what we want. So for Hobbes, there are only scientific laws of nature and human-made laws. For Hobbes, there's no such thing as divine law. Any law that exists is either a scientific law that governs this universe, or it's a human-made law, which is essentially what we saw in the movie The Lord of the Flies. The kids stranded on the island began to make their own rules and their own laws. These contracts then, in all these contracts, we each give something up, and we each get something in return. It's almost like going to H-E-B for the milk, right? I give up however much the milk costs to the cashier. The cashier gives me the milk. There's a give and take in all these contracts. In Latin, the Latin term is a quid pro quo. A quid pro quo simply means that this is traded for that, this for that, a quid pro quo. It's based on reciprocity, tit for tat. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. There's this certain give and take. When we enter into a contract, we agree to do certain things, and we agree not to do other things, and so we give up some freedom in order to better satisfy our own desires. So, in the state of nature, the state of war, okay, we're at war with one another, I could kill any one of you, any one of you could kill me. I'm going to give up my freedom to kill you by entering into a contract. You follow me? So that we can all live in peace. We're all going to give up the freedom to kill one another and agree to certain things. For instance, anytime we kill a goat, we share that goat among us all. Okay, I'll let you live for that, right? All of us are together. We come into a social contract. The principle of social contracts is that we should agree to participate in social contracts for our own good. It's for your own good that we enter into social contracts. Contracts presuppose rationality, meaning you can't make a contract with a non-rational animal. Think about that for a moment. So two people can make a contract. Maria, Sierra, they can make a contract between themselves, a compact, right? If you do this, I'll do this. They can make a contract. Can you do that with your dog? You can train your dog, and when your dog sits down, you can give your dog a treat. But that doesn't create a contract between you and the dog. That dog can still lash out. Have you heard of like lions? We train the lions and we think, oh, they're such nice cuddly animals, but then what happens? You know, they lash out because there's no contract. With human beings it's different. Human beings understand what they're getting into and they understand the consequences. Rational animals then, like humans are the only rational animal of which we're aware, we understand rewards and punishments for our actions, and that's why the contracts are so helpful, because I agree that I won't kill the rest of you, we'll all live in peace. So what happens if I kill one of you? There have to be consequences. If someone breaks the contract, the social contract, there have to be consequences. We're all going to share the marker, okay? We all agree to that. If someone decides, Deacon Cleophas, not to share the marker anymore, then there have got to be consequences. We come up with rules, and then we come up with the consequences for those who don't follow them. That's our social contract. Teachers in their classrooms, what do? They set up a social contract with their students, right? There's this give and take. You do certain things, these are the rewards or the punishments. Hobbes, famous for saying, a covenant needs a sword, because what good is a rule if there's no way to enforce it? Right? You set up a rule, but there's no way to enforce it, what's going to happen? People are going to break the rule. For contracts to work, they must be between rational individuals who understand the terms of the contract, the rewards and the punishments. And there must be a mechanism to punish those who violate the contract. What are jails all about? It's our method as a society to be able to punish those who violate our societal contracts, our laws. If you're going to live in this society, you have to follow these laws.
We